So, we've talked a lot about how the problem really is timeliness in dealing with a dynamic situation. And as the Chinese like to say, we live in interesting times. What's happened in the Ukraine is probably foreshadowing, unfortunately, what's going on in the world at large and probably likely to be a bigger issue as we go forward. The fact is, dynamic threats, dynamic systems require dynamic responses, and that can only be automated. If you are trying to do this manually, or even trying to build it yourself, then you're essentially going to be a hamster on a treadmill, spending a lot of money doing things that aren't what your business is in the business of doing. But it's necessary for you to be able to do your business. And we built ThreatSTOP to do that, particularly with Paul's expertise in network infrastructure and IETF standards and DNS. We have a very good finger on the pulse of where that's going. We all just got back from the IETF in Yokohama. And Ophir, with her background in military intelligence and later threat intelligence and also psychology, has a team that's really good at following up on this and building the relationships we need to. So I think, we talk a lot about dynamics and why that's a big issue.
Yeah.
But I think we also don't touch enough on the stress levels that people have in organizations in dealing with this. They lose their weekends. They have, all of a sudden they get their law enforcement knocking on their door, and all they want to do is just do business. And they weren't typically trying to break the law.
Yeah. And Tom, I think recently what we've seen with Russia and Ukraine, at least for the last decade or two, that's a situation that was almost unprecedented, right? Beforehand, OFAC has been around for a long time, and OFAC sanctions have been around for a long time, but they were a bit clear for the world. The world was used to dealing with the countries that you can deal with and countries that you can't. And Russia, as this global business leader, comes into play, attacks Ukraine, and leaves the whole business world in a state of what happens now. Because suddenly a big part of many global businesses, of their customer base, of their partnerships, is now being sanctioned. And then obviously we talk about Ukraine as well, and Russia invading parts of Ukraine and that complexity. And the situation that businesses are left with is much harder today than it was looking back a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And so what you're talking about, stress, being overworked, burnout for the teams, if beforehand it was hard, it's now harder. I agree.
And we should really talk about the elephant in the room. I mean, Xi Jinping has been saber rattling about Taiwan for quite some time, but China and portions of the military aligned industries in China is already subject to many sanctions regimes, and those are changing rapidly. In the news right now is banning TikTok, but the problem already exists that the second largest economy in the world, which is the world's manufacturing floor, already has a significant number of entities and related entities that are sanctioned. And who's keeping track of that? I mean, you manufacture something in China, okay, but you've got to make sure it's not manufactured by a group of Uyghurs in a concentration camp in Xinjiang. How do you do that? And who did it this week, right? I mean, speak to the work we've been doing with Five By about that. So
Five By, as I said, are really leaders in the compliance space, and they are able to do that. They have a whole team of analysts who are, have that expertise in sanctions. They go and they research and they find all of these, evasive subsidiaries in the most hard to find countries, and they're able to give us that list of information and say, listen, okay, if Huawei was to be sanctioned, all of these other countries would be sanctioned inside and outside of China. So again, we always have the kind of obvious ones, and then the rest who are, even if they're not evasive, you might not know about them. If they are, it's much harder.
And the reason we're able to do this is we come from a network and networking background. We understand that where something physically is not necessarily indicative of who it's under the control of. Paul, you were at the IETF in Yokohama, and there's a lot of discussion about policy around that. And you've obviously been working on this project in one way, shape, or form, dealing with compliance and at a carrier level ever since nominum. So what do you think? What are you seeing?
Well, I think this dynamic geography, we still have the problem of BGP hijacking. So you don't need an army, and you don't have to come in and rewire somebody's network. A little bit of BGP hacking can deal with it. So people are trying to figure out, I think, how to have not only a way to secure the routing, but also as a secondary defense, a way to deal with the routing when it isn't secure. So that's one of the things that we do at ThreatSTOP is we keep track of when this traffic is being routed through places it shouldn't be routed. But I have to wonder whether or not the safety of a bunch of mass market services that don't support things like DNSSEC and so forth, are just relying on certificates. And if you have one bad root certificate actor, how vulnerable you are. And I think that the certificate waters are much more at risk than a lot of people think.
Well, I mean, that happened, right? It wasn't even a bad certificate actor. It was just someone who got socially engineered, and they issued a certificate that signed code as Microsoft.com. And it happened to Sophos with CCleaner. And there was a fake signed thing that goes into your computer, runs as the escalated administrator user to clean out stuff, and it turned out it was Trojan. We also had the situation, BGP hijacking might seem esoteric to people, but YouTube got routed through Pakistan and then blocked at one point. And they claim it was a mistake, but the Amazon's Route 53, which is DNS for everything in Amazon, got hijacked and routed through China for a while there, a few years ago. This is not news. In fact, it was our efforts to find and block BGP hijacking that led to us figuring out, well, at least we can use this to block the Crimean ISPs that have been taken over by Russia. And so when Russia invaded Ukraine, we already had the infrastructure in place. We automatically saw it. That was lucky happenstance for us and our customers. But it started off as a way to try to figure out who was hijacking IP address space. So yeah, I agree. It's not a hypothetical. It's happened, and it will continue to happen. So I think we're not trying to scare anybody. It's happening. It's there. We're trying to make it easy to comply with it, and we hope that we can have a conversation with you and your teams about how to do this for yourselves and for others. Thanks for your time.